Okay, great. Well, welcome everybody, and welcome back to this CIB Presidential Seminar Series that we broadcast from Purdue University. As you all know, in this series for this semester, we are bringing in experts from all over the world as a panel to set up stage for the upcoming World Building Congress that is going to happen from May 19th through the 23rd here at Purdue University. And the topics for the panel are essentially how the built environment or our industry can support the sustainable development goals and what impact can we make in achieving the sustainable development goals. And so, with that said, we have today four distinguished experts from all over the world. We have Professor Neeraj Raja from Northumbria University in UK. Uh, we have Professor Fidelis Emuse from Central University of Technology in South Africa, presently in the US. Professor Wilco Thijhus from University of Twente in the Netherlands. And then we are going to have a recording from Professor Steve Rawlinson. He's emeritus professor from Hong Kong University in Hong Kong. So let me give a quick introduction to our distinguished panel, and then we can pick it up from there. I think, Paul, you have the wrong slide up as a first slide. So if you don't mind changing that. Uh, so while Paul is doing that, let me introduce our speakers. We have Professor Neeraj Thuyaraja from Northumbria University. He's the present coordinator for W55, which is Construction Industry Economics. He's an associate professor and a leading expert in construction economics, specializing in cost management, digital built environment, modern construction methods, and supply chain dynamics. He's a joint coordinator, as I mentioned, of W55 on construction industry economics, an international research network that is dedicated to advancing economic understanding within the built environment. He has served as the RCOM committee member over the last decade, contributing to cutting edge research in construction project management and economics. His work explores how organizations and supply chains navigate economic pressures, policy shift, and technological advancements to improve efficiency and sustainability. Currently leading the Sustainable Construction Futures Research Group at Northumbria, Neeraj has a strong track record of securing research funding and collaborating with the industry partners. His past leadership roles include directing the Digital Construction Center at Birmingham City University in UK, where he played a key role in industry engagement and research-driven innovation. With over 100 peer-reviewed publications, Neeraj has led several high-impact projects, including the Orbi, ACBEE, Excel IDL, and so on. Through his work in CIBW 55 and ARCOM, Neeraj continues to shape global discourse on construction economics and industry transformation, driving innovation in cost management and sustainable construction practices. Our second panelist is Professor Fidelis Emuse. He just till recently was from Central University of Technology in Free State in South Africa, and he's a former professor and head of the Department of Built Environment at Central University of Technology, as I mentioned, in the Free State. His specialization is lean construction, health, safety, and sustainability as his primary research focus, and he has received funding from several funding agencies, such as the National Research Foundation, and has published over 300 plus papers, has received numerous awards, 25 plus awards and recognition, and supervised 18 doctoral graduates. Dr. Emuse is the editor of Value and Waste in Lean Construction, Valuing People in Construction, and co editor of Construction Health and Safety in Developing Countries, Construction Safety, Health, and Well being in the COVID-19 era, and the Handbook of Drivers of Continuous Improvement in Construction Health, Safety, and Well being. He has co-authored Training Within Industry Job Programs for Improved Construction Safety, Moving the Construction Safety Climate Forward in Developing Countries, unpacking the unpacking the uh, sorry, I missed my cue there because of the phone call. But as I said, he's a very prolific author, and he's a research associate in construction management at Nelson Mandela University and an exchange scholar at the Construction Safety Research Alliance at the University of Colorado Boulder. Um, Dr. Amuse, as I mentioned, is also the editor in chief of the Proceedings of the Institution of Civil Engineers, Management, Procurement, and Law. Our third distinguished panelist is Professor Wilco Tijhuis. He's from University of Twente in Netherlands, and he's also the coordinator for W112, which is Culture in Construction. Dr. Tijhuis is a part-time associate professor at the University of Twente in Faculty of Engineering Technology in the Netherlands. His current research is in construction management and procurement, internationalization and strategies, business development and business cultures in international construction industry. Wilco publishes regularly, for example, in academic journals, books, and book chapters, and also provides keynote speeches. He's a member of several advisory boards and is also a joint coordinator of the internationally active Working Commission, W112, as I mentioned, which is Culture in Construction. Parallel to his academic position, Wilco has strong practical experience because of his management positions in international industry and being an advisor to various businesses. Last but not the least, panelist is Professor Steve Rawlinson. He's emeritus professor from Hong Kong University. He is presently in transit, so unfortunately he could not join us in person, but he has sent a recording that we are going to play for all our audience. And then he has also sent responses to some of the questions that had come up earlier. But Steve has been in Hong Kong University for over 35 years and has been a joint coordinator of CIBW 092, which is procurement systems, for much of that time. His fields of expertise are procurement systems, occupational health, safety and well-being, digital construction, and business management. He has graduated over 50 PhD students during his time at Hong Kong University, many of whom have gone on to become professors themselves, and has published a dozen books and over 100 journal papers. He is founding member of ARCOM, the Association of Researchers in Construction Management, and is a chartered civil engineer and a fellow of the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors. Indeed, a very distinguished panel, and look forward to the presentation. They will make quick 8-minute presentation followed by then all the Q&A that we're looking forward to. So with that said, Neeraj, let me hand it over to you.
Okay, just let me know when you can see the screen.
We can see the screen.
Excellent. Okay, lovely. Thank you. Okay, so it's at 8 minutes, so I'm going to rush through this quite quickly. So the chosen topic today is for us to look at economic models of sustainable construction. But let me introduce a little bit about our commission and what we are doing, and then I can talk about how the models that we have discussed in the commission relates to sustainable construction. Just a quick introduction, and I think the main part that I want to emphasize is that I focus on the intersection of economics, climate resilience, and digitalization. So that's the area that currently I am researching on. So let's go into the commission that I lead, W55 Construction Industry Economics. And as we all know, economics about scarcity and choice, is basically infinite. The resources have a finite, set of resources that we have, and we have to make a choice at some point in time to move forward. I think this is probably one of the reasons economics come into all these discussions. Traditionally, we have explored economics in two different aspects, two different parts. One is the microeconomic aspect, another one is the macroeconomic aspect. The microeconomic aspect relates to things like supply and demand, households, what happens within households, what happens within projects, and much more localized economics related activities. Macroeconomics relates to things like tariff, a very an ongoing topic at the moment, tariffs, trade deficits, and of course fiscal policy, monetary policy, and various other things. So that is how traditionally this has been divided. Now, when it comes to the Commission, we have looked at construction economics in two different forms. There were two words, two terms that we have used interchangeably, but they also had a sort of we all agreed on certain ideas, but there's one is the construction economics, the other part is construction industry economics. I think initially this is one of the oldest commission in CIB, and when it started, I think it was construction economics, and probably in the last 15 years, it has moved on to construction industry economics. However, I think there are still people use these terms interchangeably. So what's the difference between those things? In some form, construction economics, I mean, from my point of view and a lot of other people who research in this area, construction economics is economics related research in construction projects. So we look at project related aspects, that could be easily about cost estimating accuracy, risk analysis, value for money, bidding theories, game theories, tender loading, anything around projects falls into that category. And construction industry economics, on the other hand, is much more wider, broader aspect where we talk about GDP and the contribution of construction industry to GDP, national economy across different economics, multiplier effects, role of trade unions, social benefits, and things like that. Various large scale ideas have gone into construction industry economics. So at some point we decided we are going to move from construction economics much more projects based. And I think it happened because most of the researchers at that point were quantity surveyors, and their focus was on construction economics to much more broader construction industry economics. So that's the background in which we started this. Now, for this particular presentation, we are looking at economic models. Economic model is a simplified description of the reality to understand how the things work. And we have a lot of different, so every economic model that we talk about comes with its own assumptions, because assumptions then allow us to make connections between various variables. But in the current situation, the modern economy is a very complex system with globalization and supply chains spanning over various different countries and borders. This complex machine needs various different adjustments and regular adjustments. And I think this is probably one of the reasons why a lot of economists are struggling at this point in time. There is always an understanding that when the inflation goes up or interest goes up, the inflation goes down, but not anymore. We see the Keynesian theories are no more applicable. So there are challenges in this. And this is what, but one good thing about economy is economic ideas at some point automatically correct itself. I think this is something that we will see over a long period of time. It goes and it changes its things. And this is what the father of economics, Adam Smith, called invisible hand. And I think that's we are trying to understand that invisible hand and how it operates is quite a challenging thing. That's what the focus of this particular one. However, over the last few years, we have been thinking that our earlier construction economics models were very much about what sort of a research we do in macroeconomics, what sort of a research we do in microeconomics. And we've been starting to think that model it's not working anymore. Yes, there is a lot of work in this area, but that itself is not enough because of the emerging issues and challenges in the world. So we have moved on to something slightly different. We have picked out 3 different areas within the commission. This happened only within the last 2 years. After discussion between some of the panel members, we came to these three major areas of focus. Of course, the one that is more connected to today's discussion and the important aspect is environmental integration. And of course, to take social responsibility seriously and then drive these things through technological innovations. We think the combination of these three things are the foundation or the pillars of the new construction industry economics that we want to drive from, for the next 5 years, sort of a thing. That's our idea. However, we need to sort of then break this down into further bits. So going further into this, and those are the pillars. So going further into this, we still believe the basic economic theories on circular economic model still works. How community, government, and industry come together, and that flow, how the flow works, is still there. However, I think one important part is to understand the needs of clients and users and the user behaviors. I think that is emerging and that's becoming one important area. As you can see, that is one of the areas that we want to focus on. And we want to relate that one to environmental integration. I don't think environmental integration on its own can survive. And I think it's important how we connect that to the human behavior, the needs of the client and users. And this is then supported by the other aspect, which is about social inclusion, which is equality and inclusion, and then community and localism. We do believe that those two areas of research are again important to drive that pillar of activities. Then we want to talk about our technologies, and we think there are two different bits of technology. One is on industrialization. This is in the industry 4.0, cyber physical systems and things like that, changing the world and how we are operating. And of course, BIM and other things that happen. We took out AI separately because there is an increased focus over the last few years. And I think this will play a major part in the ongoing research and upcoming research. So these are the sort of 6 areas we brought out from those 3 areas. And we think that our focus needs to be on these areas for us to drive construction industry economics for the new generation of academics as well as people. I think that's where we stand as the model. Now, I was also given another question. Mark, do I have another 3 minutes? Is that okay? You are on mute, Mark, sorry.
Sorry, go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, no, okay, brilliant, thank you. So in terms of the next question was, how do we align construction economics to United Nations SDG Sustainable Development Goals? I think there is every part that we do has connections, some form of connection with all the SDG, Sustainable Development Goals, or in some form or in some manner. I've picked 5 of them. Actually, there are 4 of them I'm picking here, and I'm going to discuss these 4 because I think there are more closer connection with construction economics in this area. So first one is on, I'm combining first the first 2, which is on industry innovation, infrastructure, decent work, and economic growth. I think they are connected for us. Construction industry, and as most of us know, is seen as an engine for economic growth. And because of its multiplier effects, there are some statistics like every pound you put into construction, you get about 3 pounds of work happening in the industry, and which is an interesting way to look at, so and this is one of the reasons why governments constantly push construction industries to then, to move away from stagnation to more of a growth area. Our government at the moment is planning to build 1.5 million homes over the next 5 years. They are planning to approve so many infrastructure projects because at this point in time, we believe the UK needs growth, and way to growth is to spend money on infrastructure and construction projects. So it's already underway. The other one is, worldwide, the construction industry employs 100 million people and contributes to 13% of GDP, which is a very significant amount. And so anything that we do has a wide-reaching impact over the world. But when I focus on these SDGs. I think what becomes sort of obvious is our work on procurement strategies, optimizing procurement strategies, and further inner workings of procurement strategies can lead to decent work. I think that's one of the areas that we'll be looking at. Of course, there is a much more increased focus on social value in the UK and in various parts of Europe and the world, which is to promote local work, capacity development, and well-being. And there is also green finance related work that is going on to look at long-term growth. So this is one of the areas probably that we are easily and closely related to when it comes to SDGs. The next one on sustainable cities and communities, I think most of us will connect this one easily. This aligns because there's work on affordable housing, urban development, and of course it comes with supply and demand, it's related economics, housing prices and market dynamics that is related to that. There is an ongoing and starting to sort of there is a new trend of research on smart and sustainable cities, and this is to move away from the top-down technocentric solutions to more citizen participation engagement with smart technologies for sustainability purposes. And of course, there is ongoing work on resilient communities, looking at how we make communities resilient, community engagement, stakeholder engagement related activities. So that's the other area that we are connected to. And probably for construction, we would easily look at this as an area. The economics plays a major role in this because it's about choice. One is on circular economy. So how do we decouple economic activity from the consumption of finite resources? And then the other part is the idea of carbon versus cost, whole life carbon versus whole life cost, and how that supports decision making. There is ongoing work about green building standards and economics around it. And I think we need more, and I think we need more across the world, not just in certain parts. And that is another part that I will look at. The climate action, of course, is an ongoing one, connecting again to decarbonization, climate adaptation strategies such as carbon pricing. There are certain countries in the world, and European Union included, UK, some states in America all have emission trading schemes, and it's starting to come across the world, New Zealand, Australia. And that is also then connected to disaster risk pricing, the insurance levels and how much premium you pay. Can government support these things? There's ongoing work in that area. Of course, we need to finance these things. There is work on microfinance and urban economics that is starting to come into play in this section. So to conclude, I still think when you ask me what is the economic model, I am going back to this pillars of construction industry economics. I think these drive our understanding at this point in time. But we need to acknowledge that all economic models have limitations, and they will fail at some point because of certain conditions that we are exposed to. But what is important is these type of events for us to conceptualize, refine, discuss these type of ideas so that we understand the system and we understand the complexities around these things. I'll stop it there. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Professor Raja, for setting the stage for does construction economics support implementation of UN SDGs. I think that was a very good start in getting everybody's thought process working. So let's take a different opinion from the perspective of people in construction, and how does that relate to construction economics and support for the SDGs? And with that said, let me hand it over to Professor Amuse. Fidelis?
Thank you, colleagues. Can you see my presentation clearly?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
I'll be talking about worker-focused construction economic models, pathway to achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. But of course, from the perspective of people, which, despite the advancement in technology, to me are the most important element in construction, because without it, the technology that will be used. Thank you so much. I must thank Mark. I don't need to talk about myself anymore. You read my short citation so much. So despite the phone call, you did so well. But what I want to say here on this slide is so that everyone will understand where I'm coming from. I've been with people in construction. I started with people in construction when it was a task group. Then it grew to a working commission. What do? We focus on everyone that is on site. Whether you're a professional, a civil engineer, or construction manager, or you're a general worker, you are part of the team. So what our work in the working commission focus on everyone on site. And what do we seek to do? To advance the performance of project, to advance the image of the industry while preserving the life of people that deliver our infrastructure, our buildings, and everyone. And it's very easy for me to do that because of my years working on construction site, both in Nigeria and South Africa. So by default, we focus on people, social issues. We also address a range of SDGs, which I will mention in a couple of slides. My predecessor, who incidentally is now also co-coordinator, is Professor John Smallwood. I needed to mention him or else he might tongue lash me. All right. So thank you, Mark, for introducing me, and I think I'll move on quickly. I'm mindful of the time. 8 minutes, I want to beat Niraj. I must finish. I won't ask for extra time. Now, in introduction, I will explore SDG 3 because it's very close to my heart. I've written so much around that. I've written also on SDG 8, decent work and economic growth. One of the books that Mike mentioned addressed that. Then I'll talk about SDG 9, industry, innovation, infrastructure, and the last one, the big one that we cannot overlook in our industry, is SDG 11. But the broader question that I'll be answering with my presentation is, how can worker-focused economic models achieve SDGs? But I'll focus on this in the interest of time. I thank you, Niraj, for your models. It helps me. I'm going to spend just a few seconds here. What is constitutional economics? It's basically examining economic principles as it affect us in the construction sector, which include labor market, productivity, and investment. Professor George Ofori is not here. He will talk more on construction economics any day. Then, worker-focused economic models prioritize worker well-being, interest, fair wages, decent working conditions, and the likes. That is, in essence, what I will be focusing upon in my short presentation. And of course, in relation to SDGs, everybody on this platform, if you don't know SDG, then there's a problem. Now, the industry that we are all connected to, whether we are working on site or we are in the university, has significant impact on a range of SDGs. If I want to just use illustration to underscore what Niraj said, what we do affects almost all the SDGs. For example, there's low barrier to entry into construction industry. So construction industry provide employment for a lot of people, which inadvertently reduces hunger, SDG 2, and lower poverty level, SDG 1. Then in doing that, we want to preserve the health and safety of people that are working, SDG 3. We want to give them good education, which I'll flag 1 or 2 as we go on, SDG 4. So we can go on until we get to partnership. So construction industry, just want to foreground it, has implication directly or indirectly on all the SDGs. But for the work of the People in Construction Working Commission, we are closely linked to SDG 3, 8, 9, and 11. I want to use a snapshot because I'm here now, so it was easy for me to extract this data on the 14th. In the world over, you have enormous number of people working on site. Even as we are on this platform right now, people are busy building houses, infrastructure, and road projects. In the US, if you look at it now, This data of 2023 shows that you have over 600,000 campaigners, construction laborers, over 800,000, construction managers, people like myself, I call myself a construction manager, more than 250. You have electricians, you have millions working on site. And sadly, you have people dying on our site as well. The same statistics I can get from South Africa where I come from, but at least this one is easy for me to share. And this is where we must pay attention to construction economics, because the model we use affect the life of people. So what are the key features when it comes to economic models that relates to us? We want economic model that we project fair wages and social protection for everyone working on site, whether you are in site management or you're a general worker. We want investment in skills, especially now that we have technology that's evolving, robust health and safety programs, OSHA, etc., but our programs cannot be stagnant. They must be forward-looking, and they must actually necessarily preserve the life and property of everyone. And workers must have a voice. That is the kind of model we want to see in the industry. So if you focus quickly on, I have 3 more minutes. Focus quickly on SDG 3, we expect that there will be positive impact on worker safety, reducing fatalities and injuries. One person dying is too much, not to talk of 1,000 dying in a particular calendar year. Access to healthcare and mental health programs for workers, we want to see that. Promoting ergonomy so that people are not stressed out and have lifelong chronic things that they have to deal with because they were working in the construction industry. Of course, we want software, AI, etc., to help us as we use a philosophical approach to look at zero vision initiative. Myself and Fred wrote a book chapter on zero vision as a philosophy, not about the numbers, a few years ago. So when it comes to SDG 8, decent worker economic growth, we want to see fair wages. I see some of the students already wrote some questions on this, and job security, because indirectly, it gives higher productivity and reduced turnover if you're happy when you're working. We want to see better workforce training so that we can adapt to technology. Technology does not mean that we must lay off people. We must just retrain and adapt, and so that we can do better. And we have been doing some of these things, different programs. You have apprenticeship system apart from university program that can assist us to do all this all over in developing country and developed country. And when it comes to SDG 9, we talked about innovation through empowering the workers. Innovation must necessarily have the input of workers, and it must benefit them. That's where it is sustainable. And of course, modern construction method through lean, etc., can be used. When it comes to SDG 11, building energy efficient infrastructure mustn't kill anyone in the process. Smart city mustn't get anybody injured, because we want all our city to look like Singapore or some other fancy city. All right, and Niraj is smiling. So now I'm going to close very shortly. There are challenges. For example, now I use South Africa as challenges. We have high informal labor rates because of the informal construction going on in South Africa and many South American, African countries, lack of social security for those guys that are working on site, inconsistent enforcement of labor laws and regulations that eventually lead to serious incident and accident on site. So what are the initiatives that are required for us? Fair wage policy and worker right awareness. They must know their right. Investment in training is very, very important all over the world, whether developed or developing. So what are the outcomes that we know we will see? And we have seen in South Africa: reduce labor unrest and strike actions. When they are happy, they do the work. There's no quarrel between the site engineer and the general worker. Improve project completion rate, the work gets done. In the US, you have also challenges. Aging workforce. This is not limited to the US. You have the same in Australia and other developed countries. Labor shortages, high injury rate in small firms, because obviously they don't invest so much money in health and safety. So we can use apprenticeship programs to address all this and stronger enforcement of regulation. Similarly, you have increased productivity and retention in trained workers and reduction in on-site fatalities. So what are the constraints? We still have constraints: budget limitation for safety and health training, cultural barriers when we resist new labor policies, regulatory hurdles, because as you know, different jurisdictions, you have different standards, and we have to enforce it. So for the students that are on the platform, please do us a favor. We welcome these questions. Embrace them, the graduate student. What policies effectively enforce fair wages in global construction market? We don't know them, we want to know. How can worker well-being strategies contribute to productivity and sustainability? Conceptually, we agree, but we need to see the evidence. How do worker-focused economic models impact long-term profitability? They mustn't be working at cross-purpose. They must work in the same direction. Please think about all these things. So my key takeaway, this is what I think, and I'm speaking on behalf of everyone in our working commission. Worker-focused model improve safety, productivity, and sustainability. They work together because the model is focusing on the workers who are doing the job. Public and industrial policy, therefore, must align to this. And we need further research. We need good evidence for what we are saying. So I thank everyone. As Madiba said, it always seems impossible until it is done. We can do it. Thank you very much, Mark. I think I did not steal too much.
True statement. No, thank you very much. That was indeed bringing in very important points with respect to people in construction. So let's move on in our dialogue here and hear from Professor Tahus about what role does culture play, culture and construction play in supporting the economic requirements and the SDGs. Wilco, over to you.
Thank you, Mark. I have to go in the right screen and have it. I hope it functions now. Can you see it or not?
Yeah, we can see it, yeah.
Yes, we can see it.
You see it, you see the, and I'm going now to the presentation line. You see it now in version 20 if possible.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, thank you, Mark, and all the colleagues for inviting me about this. I hope the screen does not go too fast. Oh, wait, that is something happening. Okay, probably is not good. So what I have done, I want to give you some background information about the culture's influence, but I will try to do that on the basis of, say, some main goals. So, in fact, culture is, say, humans' characteristics, to put it frankly, and it influences, therefore, every phase of construction industry, and also every attempt we want to do is changing towards the UN SDGs. And so, therefore, it's more broader, put it there. But in W112, we use these models also, and we use this analysis also to get more understanding about what's happening internationally, what's happening on a national, regional, or even local scale. Because people is in construction. Construction is a people's business. If you look from whatever perspective about, it all has to do with people. We are the contractors, we have the architects, we have the financiers, the insurers, etc., etc. So from that point of view, I have distinguished some basic parts which I want to highlight more or less about that. And if you see the construction, look to these both pictures, it can be the biggest ones and the high-rise building with glass facades, whatever, but also the very small ones which looking to that left or right under corner, where it's very simple, but still a people's business to construct. And there you see it's more logistics instead of technology and whatever it in between is. If you go then to that layers, and then we base mostly about the Hofstede basics, but Hofstede has developed more and more, of course, and we also add knowledge to that. You see, in fact, it's like a prism where you put white light through the prism, you see it dispersed in many colors. And so many characteristics, many parts of people's beliefs, behavior, hierarchy, values, whatever you can distinguish. And that are, in fact, the basics, how people behave themselves in practice. So if we want to change, if we want to speed up developments, if we want to adapt the UN SDGs, that are all the aspects and many more which we have to deal with. Because in the end, we can write many guidelines, we can write many documents and so on. But if in the end, no one wants to adhere to that, no one wants to accept it, then we still have a problem. And so that is a kind of way we have to deal with, and therefore in this kind of analysis. In the end, it's just like a kind of jigsaw puzzle, because people who work as they work, so it's the personalities which are consisting of many parts. But if you look into a concentral model, you have the central parts with the beliefs, which are the fundamentals, which are the hierarchy, which is also depending on where, in which kind of culture you are, and there are many different sides of that. The values which you distinguish about what you find practical, what you find the value of your life and your community. And in the end, it's, say, represented by the practices, resulting in actions and behavior of people and groups of people. And the more you consider the groups, the more you see the difference between them. As we saw many years ago, already in the 80s, the Hofstede distinguished those that these 4 dimensions and the power distance have we in our groups of people have the power, so can we more or less guide others towards what we want them to do. And if you look from SDGs perspective, we see guidelines, we see, say, agreements, so we have to adhere to that, but are we really able to adhere to that on group level? And you see the collectivism versus individualism, how we acting as an individual but still belonging to a group, or as a collective in neglecting individualism. Femininity, masculinity, how it is considered to be, say, very tough guy or very tough woman, whatever, is that seen as very positive, or is that indeed the negative sides of that, and opposite way also. And the fourth one, that's a more, say, analyzable one, uncertainty reduction. You can see that representing in the way how contracts are signed or agreements are made. And it doesn't need always to be a signed contract, but an agreement between people, what to do, they say what they want to do, and how they are doing it, that are representing with this kind of stuff. But getting then in the later stage, and when China, especially the Chinese area, became more free, he came to add there 2 extra dimensions, the future orientation. Are we really thinking in the short term or long term? So it means, do we only care for what's all about it around us now, or do we really care for what our children or families or later generations are really have to deal with that? And if you look to SDGs, then it's in fact a very long-term situation, at least comparable to what nowadays is still long-term, but time is really running fast, and maybe time is really running out on that. Indulgence, restraint, other 2 things, how we deal with situations. Are we very strictly acting or reacting to that, or very, say, more relaxed to do things, etc. If you look at to the model, which we gradually develop on that, and there you see the 3C model, and what's one of the development and that kind of stuff, that if you go into construction or, say, organizations, you often see this loop. That means we and most of the people are coming from technology and have been trained on that, and gradually they trained in the project organization, and in the end, everyone has to do with the culture, because that layer is behind it. But many of the people don't take care about any of that, because it's often considered as soft factors. Say, oh, wait a minute, you cannot describe it, you cannot deal with that, etc., etc. But in the end, it is a very, say, distinguishing factor. If we can still keep this loop running. And so the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and many projects are being delivered, and then we see, wait a minute, the wall is not as we expected it, it has cracks or whatever, so we get a conflict. And are we going to court or not? And all those kind of things. And so just to wrap up in that case, it's part of daily life, and it's in fact the culture's role, getting more and more to aware of that. It reduces risk, it also increases to be aware of the opportunities and the possibilities, what's going around, if we want to change, if we want to go forward. I have here said the part of that, so you see in that decreasing number of arrows in the front end, that you're getting more and more, if you are aware of on the front line about what the culture's influence in a group of people is, and it can be 2 people together is already a group in this case, the more you reduce your risk, that in the end you be quite disappointed, and or that you even can prevent for getting to court with your projects, or maybe getting to actions. there is another model, and that we translated to that. That's a NEDU matrix model, we call it. And there you see a comparison between the Netherlands and the German situation, how you more or less distinguish keywords of behavior during the different stages of the contract. I won't go too deep into that, but if you would go through the diagonal from left upper side to right underside, and you see that in fact the adherence to those kind of, say, resulting framework, that you there might be able or are able to reduce because you are more, say, managing on these keywords your processes. And of course, what I already told, you reduce, in fact, the end of disappointment to get disappointed, but also conflict and dispute, and that is part of disappointment. And so, and if you look nowadays to construction industry, in fact, a huge amount of money going through the processes is paid to claims consultants and whatever you can mention around that. And so first time right, that what you see in technology-driven environments is hardly possible, obviously, in construction industry. It improves, be honest, it really improves, but still a lot of things to be done. And the whole construction industry process has a part of the SDG change, also has to deal with their daily life, where a lot of problems are say, occurring. And you see it here, and it is an old model of Feldsteiner, Abel, and Sarab, but we developed it further. And if you look to conflicts, you have always three, or more or less three stages, which we use. Naming, are we named? Are we say, wait a minute, we have a problem? Blaming, who has the liability to that, or responsibility to that, and claiming, who has the liability to that. And this loop, and it is in fact a very important loop, and often considers the differences in the cultures are mainly represented by the fact that in certain cultures you hardly get from naming to blaming, and in other cultures you immediately get from naming towards blaming into the claiming. So that is different already, how to deal with those situations and cultures. And that is, and as if that wouldn't be enough, we see, of course, actually the artificial intelligence coming in, which tries to take over the human role in many processes, only everywhere in society, also in construction. And so you could say, wait a minute, we hardly have to think about anymore, because every process and every perspective is being, say, like a prophecy, and we can expect it that it functions proper and right. And you learn, yes, that might be true, but in the end, you have a lot of technologies coming in, which always and all have to deal in the people's mindset and people's mindset. Where do we set our, say, perspective? Where do we set our priorities? And so in this case, it can be a blessing, all the things around us, but it's in more or less also getting a threat. And looking to the actual developments in the world, you see a lot of things that it goes faster than we ever could believe in a sense. And so all these things are more or less forcing us to think, to rethink, and where are we going, but also on the SDGs, how can we use them properly so that the decision making will go in a direction that it supports and it reduces the disputes risk, etc., but also takes with us the people involved. And otherwise it gets a system where no one feels like a recognition, no one feels the use, no one feels the need anymore, the urgent anymore. And so we try to use it more like predictable procedures, supporting instead of taking over the people's roles, but also to be realistic and knowing when and what to do if we are in other cultures, in other mindsets, and have to deal with that. There are some references to a literature about that. No, some of you might know them already, but this is what I wanted to do as an introduction, and thank you.
Thank you, Professor Tajus. That was indeed very well presented. And culture can add so much risk if you're not aware of the cultural differences, and particularly in international projects. And you did touch upon many of those points, and I'm sure we'll bring those back up when we get into the Q&A part of it. So with that said, Paul, can you pull up Professor Rawlinson's presentation so we can go through that and then open for Q&A, please? So this is Professor Steve Rawlinson from Hong Kong.
Good morning. I am Steve Rawlinson from the University of Hong Kong, where I am Emeritus Professor. I have been co-coordinator of CIBW 92 along with Peter McDermott for the past 20 or so years. Peter McDermott would have been here today along with me, but he is sailing down the Nile at the moment, full stop. It is quite difficult performing in front of an imaginary audience, but I will start by saying that our working commission deals with procurement, about how we get things built. As you all know, it's a complex process involving many different processes and professions and ways of working. So I would like to start this discussion with a view that the construction business model is broken. It is not fit for purpose, and the problem lies around the fact that sustainability is difficult to maintain or achieve when we have a nexus of shareholders and board of directors and project directors and site managers and our workforce. The consequence of the nature of the business model is that production pressure is regularly laid on the workforce and project managers. As such, this is an institutional issue, as it is a business and project and site management set of issues. Many organizations are dominated by the stakeholders, or we might call them the owners of the company, by the fact that they have invested in a particular company and they drive that company by setting profit margin targets such as 5% expectation. This is a difficult thing to achieve given the nature of the industry, which is based around competitive bidding and which focuses on maximizing cash flow. The nature of this process creates a glass ceiling where the shareholders sit above and dictate margins to the directors and project directors below, who then pass this pressure onto the workforce. So we have an industry which focuses on distrust and pressure during the organisation of projects. It would be much more fulfilling for the business and the industry if profitability was measured in terms of return on capital employed. The industry itself tends to focus on bringing in cash early by overvaluing work that has been done and by paying its subcontractors and workforce late. This leads to the distrust and the fact that many construction companies go into liquidation, the industry having the worst record in terms of going bankrupt, and also the industry has the worst record in terms of suicide rates in the industry. So it is very difficult to understand how such an industry can take on board the UN's sustainability goals when it cannot look after its own workforce and its own clients. Our problem is that many projects are delivered over budget to poor quality using shoddy materials. The industry needs to make a sea change and stop the outflow of design, construction and facilities management skills and professionalism. I recently refereed a paper for a major journal, and the paper came from academics in Africa, and their thesis in the paper was that the industry could not be sustainable because sustainable materials were expensive and produced predominantly in the major industrialized companies and countries. To my mind, this is the wrong mindset to have. There should be a focus on indigenous materials and indigenous ways of designing, building and maintaining properties and assets. This brings in the idea of culture is important within these sustainable goals, and Wilco will no doubt raise this as an issue. The industry does not engage its workforce. The industry is dirty, dangerous, and likely to be the source of problems rather than solving our problems. So, how do we address these issues? I think we have at least 3 challenges on sustainability and its achievability. Should we and can we change our construction business model to make it both fair and equitable and effective? Can we possibly expect to achieve our UN sustainability goals in an industry that is dirty, dangerous, and demanding? It is highly unlikely that we can achieve these goals, certainly with the labour shortage that exists in many countries at the moment. So, my point being made is that we have to change the business model of the industry, which relates to not just contractors, subcontractors, workers, but directors, shareholders, and the government and private clients must take a lead role in addressing these issues. Thank you.
Well, so here we have yet another viewpoint, particularly from procurement systems and how procurement systems can be a hindrance or assist in achieving our goals. So with those 4 viewpoints, I'm sure the audience has a lot of questions coming up in mind. So let's go to the Q&A part. And I cannot see everybody, but if you raise your hand, I will know. Well, let's start with Jorge. Jorge, can you raise your question, please? Okay, Stanley will come to you next.
So my question was regarding how is the automation in construction may affect or will be perceived as different in a developed nation than in a developing nation? Like in a developing nation might seems like more like a concern for job security, and in developed nation probably seem more like a solution for lack of skilled labor.
Anybody wants to take that on?
Oh, are you talking to me?
No, this is
This is answered
our
by Professor
panelists.
Rawlinson.
Okay, can I go first?
Yes, please go ahead.
Because that affects people, automation. Yes, I think in developed country, it might, in the short term, solve the problem because of lack of skills and all that. In developing countries, it's a different context. Why? Because we use the construction industry to provide a lot of low-level jobs for the larger part of the population. However,
Looks like Professor Fidelis is frozen. Bandwidth issues, perhaps. So what you see on the screen right now is the response that Professor Rawlinson had sent ahead of time to one of these questions, and I think you can all read that from there. And indeed, he brings out a very good point. But while Fidelis is fixing his system, yeah, Wilco, please go ahead.
Maybe to add on that, because I think Steve has put a good explanation on that. What I'll see from a European perspective, we see in the Netherlands, for example, the last few years, a huge increase of production facilities for industrialized, say, construction methods. And so that means a lot of contractors have to speed up the process, so that indeed it seems to be that it helps to improve labor circumstances, but it changes then towards factory-related stuff. The other way is that in the end, the legislation procedures for the whole construction works, and so building scheme, building zones, and zoning schemes, that is the one of the biggest barriers, so that construction still has to suffer on long waiting times and so on. And what I remember from an early days project where I was involved in the South African situation, that in that situation, they specifically introduced, say, labor-intensified construction methods because of the local situation. And because in construction industry is, of course, a driver for a lot of labor work, albeit not always, say, the best place to work on, but that has to be improved. That's some safety and health. But you always have to balance, in fact, where you are, if you would choose labor-intensified or if you would choose, say, automated, and all in between. Because that's the social value, in fact, also of construction industry and its influence.
Indeed, and not to forget that increase in use of equipment could also add to a negative impact on the SDGs, as we already contribute much to carbon emission by use of equipment on our project sites. Neeraj, you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I was just looking for the hand. Is there a hand I can click on? Yeah, no, thanks. I think I had to agree with the views here. I mean, I think, but I don't think it's a negative thing for developing countries. I think the question was whether it is, is it a bad thing for the developing countries? I think that even the countries, I think, first of all, what is developing countries anyway? Well, let's move away from that. But I think most of the Western, European countries, they haven't figured out the system completely. They're still figuring out the system, I believe. The UK government spent a lot of money from the last few years supporting modular contractors to come to speed, but then some of them went bankrupt because the economic model that they have is not exactly, because it's at the end of the day, it's about what people prefer. There's still a stigma attached to prefabricated houses in the UK. I think Europe probably is away from that. There's still that problem. 1960s, 1950s houses are not so well maintained, and I think this is one of the reasons why Steve has sort of pointed out that they don't actually deliver everything that we want. I think there is improving. These things are improving, but at this point in time, I don't think it's, they both have their own advantages. And I think what is important is to see not something as a fully automated industrialized home and not fully built home, and somewhere in between. And this is the idea of pre-manufactured value of what percentage of the components can be brought into buildings is something probably interesting for us to look at, because maybe there is an I don't believe in optimization level, but there's a point that we could take that certain parts of automation optimization would be useful, but I don't think we should take that as a negative thing.
Thank you, Neeraj, and thank you, Jorge, for bringing that question up. Let's move on to Stanley. Stanley, go ahead, please.
Okay, all right. Please confirm that you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, my question is directed to Professor Fidelis. If I like your presentation on people and construction, because the human resources is one of the vital elements alongside with the capital and material resources. So you gave a research question during the course of your presentation, and you said that the graduate students can go ahead to make their inputs on them. So I don't know whether I can contribute my opinion on that matter.
You can certainly do that with the permission of Mark.
Yes, you can. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, all right.
Keep it brief, however, I would request. Yeah.
Obviously, sir. The second question intrigued me. How can worker well-being strategies contribute to productivity and sustainability? Okay. During my place of work, one of the ways in which worker well-being can contribute to productivity is having a friendly working hours, in the sense that during a day job, the day's operation, there should be break, either 2 hours break or 1 hour, 30 minutes break. This helps them to recover and also to feed themselves during those breaks, so that the remaining hours of the work would be proactive and they would do well in it. And also monthly recognition, in the sense that at times every month workers that perform outrightly should be rewarded and recognized so that there will be low turnover and they will contribute very well in the course of the work. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Stanley. Thank you for adding that dialogue. Hayvon, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Haywan. Thank you everyone for the awesome presentation. I have a question to Dr. Rolko. A culture is something that everyone acknowledges is important, but often overlooked in practice. And your point was very effective. Also, integrating AI into the culture was insightful, along with the high quality of presentation. Moreover, when considering culture in the context of construction project operate like case by case basis, bringing together multiple stakeholders who create a unique environment for each project. And if we extend this to international project, as you mentioned, the dynamic becomes more complex and dynamic. Can you share any international project case study or case study where culture has significant impact or influence strategy?
Yes, I have them. Would go too far if I would fully detail them here, but we can do it afterwards also. Now, yes, indeed, where you see that many people going abroad or going into projects are trained from a technical background. So that means their sensibility on thinking into cultural reasoning why things happen is often, say, starting at the moment they see that they fail. So that they see that things go wrong and they didn't expect it go wrong. So therefore, my say underpinning the role of the critical incident, which doesn't need always to be a conflict situation, but is at a certain moment critical. And there you learn the most of those things. And so for contractors working in an international setting or in another region where they are used to work, that is one of the highest risks they encounter, because their people are not aware of what's happening around them. And you see, for instance, I live in the Netherlands, I work quite a lot of them abroad and also in project cases. But even if I go 30 kilometers across my border, then I'm in Germany, there you see already total differences between how construction industry is organized and how they behave because of that difference in organizing. And that all has to do with their, say, cultural mindset, how people are behaving and expecting about dealing with risk, dealing with uncertainty, resulting contracts, and dealing also with that conflicts resulting in that. So, and I know from other experiences, if I worked a lot of time with Chinese contractors, they work in the Middle East, as an example, and they said to me, Woko, we are sending, in fact, our youngest engineers to the abroad projects because the older ones don't want to do that. So in fact, you increase your risk, or you're doubling, more than double your risk, because you go in a risky situation, it's abroad, you don't know it, and you send there your most unexperienced guys or women there, which they learn a lot of them, but that is on very high risk cost. And that resulting is very, say, in fact, unlogical to do it that way, but it has to do with how people consider things and how they feel comfortable or not.
Indeed, indeed. Anybody else, panelists, would like to add to that? Okay, thank you, Haley. Thank you for that question. Anybody else who has a pressing question? Jake, you had a question?
Hey, thank you guys for your presentation today. A lot of the questions that I had submitted have been already answered, but I had a question and maybe I missed it. So if you already talked about this, please just remind me. But how can workforce strategies make construction more sustainable, especially with future developments?
Thank you, Jake, for that question. I think I'll take that. Workforce strategy necessarily have to engender a range of things that, let me use the word, progress people that will do the work. That's why in my presentation, I focus on SDG 3, which has to do with the health and well-being, and also decent work, which is SDG 8. If, for example, you focus on a strategy that do not allow discrimination or exploitation, or that amplify respect for people regardless of your let me use the word pay grade on site, then you're actually embedding social sustainability, for example. So workforce strategy can address sustainability in multiple ways. In my presentation, I only flag for SDGs. I'm happy to share it through Mark if you want to get it later on, Jake.
Yeah, that'll be great. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Jake. Thank you for that question. Ghanem, you had submitted a question. Are you still around? I don't see Ghanem here. Jim, you had a question.
Yes, thank you. I guess my question is from the people standpoint. Construction's had a long history of utilizing immigrants and foreign labor in their systems, i.e. low cost. What in terms of people or economics or culture is going to kind of reverse this in the future and not have the marginalized people filling in the lower parts of the labor market?
Go ahead, Wilco.
Yes, thank you for this good question, because that is, in fact, a very important one even, because that turning point, how can we turn that trend that construction is considered as a sector where everyone could start working without any training, education, whatever, that is low cost, low level laboring, considered that, is extremely strange that it went that way, because it's one of these sectors where the product with the highest capital investment are realized. And so, in fact, if you would say a low-cost product might even not be a low-cost laboring need, but construction is one of the highest cost product sector wherever. And what you see, in many cases, the real problems of, say, that low-cost labor approach do not come at the first year after completion, but come after 5, 6, 7 years, where the building starts leaking and starts getting troubles, etc., etc. That is one of these things where contractors, and especially the clients, need also to be more aware. Are they really paying the real value of the building, what they need? And that is an intertangled system nearly, that at one hand, the client wants to cut costs as strong as possible. The contractor says, okay, I can do it, but he cannot do it without reducing costs in his subcontracting, etc., etc. So if you look, say, from a lean construction model, which also is buzzwords, I know, as you also know, like Toyota started in the 90s, etc. You see that publication, the machine that changed the world, that's one of the leading ones in that early days. It is all based that if a contractor makes more profit, then the supply chain behind him and it also goes in the same direction. So they share the margins. On the other way around also, if the contractor needs to reduce profit, they also do it on a fair base to the subcontract. So there is a more growing like an intersystem that people are connected to each other on a fair base instead of only screwing down on those ones. And that is a culture which hardly is obviously to be broken. But you see here and there, you see development starting up. And in many cases, I've learned more and more that renewal of those kind of approaches doesn't need to come maybe even from the construction sector itself. Many improvements come from other sectors because others say, wait a minute, what's that, a crazy sector? Why can't we change that? And so it could still be that, say, the biggest innovators from construction might not come from construction, but might come from, say, the Silicon Valleys of these worlds, where you have another approach. But if there is all things without respect for the human factors in it, then it's still one of the biggest challenges to improve that.
Neeraj, Fidelis, you want to add to that?
Yeah, it's an important part. We see this across the world. I think that's the challenge. I think it's understandable why the question is raised. It's an opportunity for someone, and probably it's a problem for someone else. So it's how we handle this. I think there's a need for government intervention into this. I think it is important that we treat people equally, and this is one of the areas that we have been looking at. I think this problem exists across the world, unfortunately, and this is not something that we can hide from. At the moment, it is. If you take the UK at this point in time, there's a huge shortage of labor. When a few years back we had European Union, and it wasn't about low cost, low labor, but we had a larger market. There was a mobility of labor. At the moment, that mobility is gone. So we have so much and the government sometimes puts a different spin on it to say that we can reach out to the whole world, but we're still struggling to find people to work on construction projects, which means the prices are going up, which means at the end of the day, the cost of buildings are going up. Yeah, it is, you have to look at both sides. It's important that we provide the right conditions for people to work. We treat people equally. We provide opportunities for them to improve, build a capacity. I think those are very important parts of it. But at the same time, I think the other side of the story is that how does the finance and economics work for this? At this point in time, it's quite very scary bit. So the prices have gone up drastically. For example, a bricklayer costs have increased, almost doubled in the last few years in the UK, which is, so it becomes very difficult. And how the contractors are starting to address this is to come up with the different models of construction. So we don't actually build brick by brick anymore. We have panels, and we put the panels together. So there are different tactics going on, but it is a difficult market. It is a challenging task. I don't think technology is the final answer, but technology can help. I take Wilco's point on, it's we pay less at this point in time for a product, and we may end up paying more at a later point in time. So it's important that we make sure. I think one of the things that some contractors are effectively doing, I've seen, is to develop that capacity over a period of time. So I think that is something that probably we need to have as part of the agreement or the procurement systems to build the capacity. I think that is an important part. Thanks.
Thank you, Neeraj. I think in the interest of time, we're almost running out. Let me throw in my final question, and I would ask that each of the panelists, if you take a minute or so to respond to that, and your thoughts with that. So it's a complex question. All of you have brought these points up, but Anita, you started off by talking about the 6 different pillars that you look at, and one of those was industrialization. And indeed, we have also found that by 2030, most of the construction is likely to be off-site. And given that the industrialization or the factory-built products are likely to be more prevalent, not only in terms of cost, but a lot of the issues that we were discussing just now from an economic standpoint also. But within that, if we put in, like Fidelis was bringing up, the cost of construction in supporting the SDGs, then in some projects, the modular aspect might play a more economic role or more financially beneficial role than where there's abundance of labor, for instance, where it may not quite pan out to be effective. And then Wilco, you brought in very important that there's a cultural issue. So if let's say you're running a project in a different country, and you bring in your modular concepts and you want to implement those and recommend those to the client, But the client culturally is not ready for those technological advances or whatever vice versa that you're likely to bring, then that is going to create another problem and might hinder uh, our objective of meeting the SDGs and while keeping it as economical as possible. And then Steve in his presentation mentioned sustainability for us is difficult to achieve when we have so many diverse workforce and cultures coming together, particularly if you throw that in an international environment. So your thoughts, please. How in this complex environment of our industry, what do you think from your perspective needs to be done to move towards achieving SDGs? So Wilco, let's start with you.
All right, thank you very much. Yeah, it's a good wrap-up question, I guess. Yeah, in fact, it starts with human being. It's human-centered construction, and not only because of the human being in the construction industry, but also we have the clients. In fact, without clients, there's no construction industry at all. And governments are supporting the process, but are not leading the process. And so that means if we can achieve that the clients are getting more, say, aware of what's happening, and you see it already in, say, the investment side. If you look now to big investment funds, be it in the US, Europe, whatever, Asia, they have to work according all the CSRD regulations and the ESG. So that means if you cannot comply anymore with your projects according to that, they won't be able to invest anymore in your product. So that means that is on the broader scale. If you look to the individual, say, housing clients, they are maybe still more driven by the cost, purely cost driven. And that is then also another point where you say, wait a minute, is it reasonable that things are standing in the way and is now going? And so it is partly of education, awareness, and in fact, forcing somehow the regulations also in a certain direction. Because that is one of these things. At one hand, we want to make simplification of regulations, and that zoning schemes, etc., go faster through the process. But parallel to that, we could also more improve the regulations around health and safety and everything around it, so that it is a joint, say, progress in all the processes towards more parallelly running SDG goals.
Thank you, Wilco. Fidelis, 30 seconds.
All I want to say is, like Wilco said, construction is demand-driven. Clients dictate what we do. If we can change the orientation and the intelligence of our client to say they want project that is sustainable, the process that do not kill anyone, and the process that is fair, I think we'll make a lot of inroad into what we're trying to do. And in closing, modular construction is going to change a lot of things. We are busy with a book project that's going to cover case studies from different parts of the world. It has its own pro and con, but clients also play a role in that as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fidelis. Neeraj, let me give you the last word.
Yeah.
30 seconds.
Okay, thanks. I'll start with a small story. This is my grandfather used to plant mango trees when he was probably in his 80s, so, and if you ask him, well, is he going to have those mango trees? Probably not. He's never thought that will ever grow and give mangoes to him. But he is planting those things because he thinks that I can have them. And I think it's important for us to think about the world, that we are not doing this just for us, but in a long term, how do we leave those things to the future? SDGs at the end of the day are just, list of things that we are looking at. But the fundamental thinking behind why we do this is important, and it needs to go across not just individuals, not just companies, but governments. And I do think government intervention is important. There are several UK reports from 1950s to the 2000s tell you none of the construction industry will change anywhere. It will never go anywhere without government intervention. So I think that is important. Government needs to play a major part in this before we go anywhere.
Thank you, Neeraj. I want to thank all of you, all our panelists, for this wonderful discussion. I had a whole list of other questions that we can keep on asking, and we can go on for hours together. But indeed, given the time constraint, I'll have to close this session. But I want to thank all of you for coming from different parts of the world, taking time in different time zones for this very important conversation. And I hope your thoughts have only added some more questions and thoughts to in the audience, and they will take that as something to ponder upon and develop it further. So to my audience, please open your mics and give our panelists a big round of applause. Thank you all very much. And stay tuned for next week panel. And we look forward to another very interesting conversation at that time. So with that said, thank you all.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everyone. Bye, Niraj. Bye. Thank you, Paul.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.